Okay, let's still filling in, but let's get started. Thanks everybody for joining us for this webinar. First things first, if you notice on the screen, information about our upcoming conference. If you haven't registered, please do so within the next couple of weeks before we close registration. Classes are filling up. We have a strong showing right now, which is a good thing. So it's going to be 2 days. We got a lot of great classes all set up. So go ahead and take a picture of that QR code, and if you're interested, go ahead and register. With that, thanks for joining us. We're continuing on our Zen engineering path. Mark Ditko from Zen Engineering has graciously decided to help our user group and present topics this year. Today he's got Joe Muni, who works with him. He's going to be presenting on cutting sheets, name boundaries. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe, and I'll stop sharing, Joe, and you can go ahead and share.
Great. Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, I guess, for everybody out there. Good morning for some of you, including me and Mark. As Chuck just mentioned, my name is Joe Muni. Can you see my screen?
Yes. And
okay.
let me just say one more thing. If anybody has any questions during this presentation, just put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them probably at the end.
Great.
Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, so we're Zen Engineering. We're based out of Los Angeles. As I said, my name is Joe Muni, working with Zen and Mark Ditko. What we specialize is in, Bentley Civil products and MicroStation. We do training, the product configuration, documentation, project support, and any technical support questions as well. If you allow me just a moment here to sort of just do a quick little advertisement, if you will, and then we'll move on. One of our specialties is documentation, and since we're here doing sort of a quick brown bag lunch / training class, we just wanted to point out some of our different documentation that we do. We have an entire essentials series, we call it, which is really like a consumer version of our books. They're meant to be self-paced, where you can just buy the book and read through the book. There's a lot of informational and educational text within there. It's a training manual. It comes with a data set and everything. But those are the different topics there, the terrains, geometry, typical sections. They get really deep into those specific areas. And again, they're meant to be self-paced. You don't necessarily need to have an instructor with you. We also have a specialty series, which gets to some of the other civil elements that are not necessarily roadway design related. We have a whole entire drainage manual that was written by our colleague, Carl Dauber. We have a survey book. We also have a book devoted entirely to geometry and all the different geometry tools and associated tools with geometry. In that book, you go through and basically lay out a bunch of roadway center lines and right-of-way, and do a subdivision layout, again, using all those different geometry tools within OpenRoads. And then finally, the last set of series books that we have are actually our training series. Again, these are just a manual that's used during our training class. The textual elements, or the informational information within the book is a little bit pared down because you have the advantage of an instructor-led class, where the instructor will give you kind of all that pertinent information during the lecture. So if you're interested in any of that information or those books or manuals, please, jump out to zenengineering.com and take a look at those. Now, a little bit about me. Who's this Yahoo that's about to spend 45 minutes talking to you about sheet construction? Again, Joe Muni. I received my bachelor's degree in engineering at University of Connecticut back in '94. Go Huskies. That's the, I guess you're supposed to always do that, right? Go mascot whenever you graduate from a college, I guess. Then I spent about 6 years or so in a private sector, small engineering firm, working on the survey crew, as well as doing some, design work at the end of the day. Eventually, I took a position at the Connecticut DOT, working as a highway design engineer, the transportation division there. That's where I was first introduced to Zen engineering. We had a strategic, kind of friendship since then. Eventually, about 2005, I moved back or moved out to the West Coast, got back into the private sector for a while, and then eventually came on board with Zen Engineering around 2009. And I also created and incorporated my own company in 2018 called Jam Consulting. And I have a very strategic partnership with Zen Engineering still to this day. Okay, enough about that. You guys aren't here to hear me talk about my past. What we're here for is what we call drawing production, and we're talking about using the OpenRoads tools to help you build and create, your sheets. Now, this particular session, we're going to talk specifically about creating a plan and profile sheet. So we're talking, plan over profile. So I'm not going to get specifically into just plan only type sheets or cross-section sheets, but if you're unfamiliar with these tools and the process is very, very similar. It doesn't really matter what type of sheet you're making. However, the plan and profile type sheets are, I don't want to say they're more complex than the others, but there's a little bit of a nuance there of what you need to understand about doing a plan and profile sheet versus the other ones. So I thought it would be more beneficial to talk about that type of sheet. And again, all of the different tool sets are very, very similar. It doesn't matter what sheet you're doing. So, once you learn how to do a plan and profile, you'll very easily be able to do a plan only or, profile only or cross-section sheet. Okay, so what we're going to cover here, as I said, just how to create plan and profile sheets. You're going to learn how to place something known as a name boundary. Now, I apologize if some of you have already been playing around with the OpenRoads sheet creation tools and you're kind of familiar with some of this stuff, but I will definitely dive a little deeper into some of the settings so help you understand what they mean in case you weren't fully aware of them. So the first part is to lay out what's known as name boundaries, and then from there you create what's known as drawing models and then sheet models. That's all done automatically using these OpenRoads tools, and I'll demo that live. And all along the way, again, I'll be kind of giving you some tips and tricks, things that have helped me over the years of working with this software and with these tools. And at the end, we'll learn how to put some individual annotations. So there's a few different new tools with, I'm using the most recent version of OpenRoads Designer. It's version 2022 R3 is kind of the common name. It's version 10.12 if you want to go with the version numbers. And there's a couple different ways to place individual annotations. There's still the place labels tool, and there's also what's known as the civil labeler. That's a more recent addition to OpenRoads Designer, and it's still going through a growing process. In this most recent version, it's pretty powerful tool. So we'll kind of spend some time using that tool as well. And then if we have time, and hopefully we will, I'm trying to talk quickly here. We'll show you something known as the sheet index. I believe that's still going through, I'm going to call it a little bit of growing pains. It's still evolving, but basically it's a way to help you organize all of your different sheets in a, it's an OpenRoads interface through the Explorer that allows you to kind of manage all of your sheets and quickly and easily push them out to the print organizer. Okay, so moving along, just a little bit of some sheet construction basics. Now we're talking about using the OpenRoads Designer tool set to create sheets. And basically the plan and profile sheets, or even cross-section sheets, are really just live references of your 2D model and or your 3D model, depending on what type of sheets. The cross sections will do place your slices through that 3D model, whereas the plan will use the 2D model, and then profile will use obviously your profile view. Now, what's great about these being quote unquote live references is if anything changes in any of those models, it's automatically updated and reflected in those sheets via the drawing model. Okay, so you're always going to see the most current information displayed in your sheets. Now, creating it using the OpenRoads Designer tools is a two-part process. Now, the first part is actually laying out what's called the name boundaries. Now, this is a MicroStation tool that's been around for a while, so you may be familiar with it. However, they've incorporated some new OpenRoads Designer technology into this tool to allow and leverage some workspace information that was built ahead of time. So this is the dialog that you would see, and this is dynamic in that when you change the mode of what kind of sheet you're making, this will all just kind of change and reflect the mode. Okay, now what is a name boundary? What are we trying to create here? Well, name boundary is really just a graphical shape that's drawn into the CAD file that represents your sheet extents, right? Think of it as a clipping shape. Now, I don't know exactly how you guys have been creating sheets, in the past or over the years, but I know when I was in the production world, the way we did it, or the way, my agencies and companies worked, is we just worked directly in that design model space. And again, there was a little bit slight flavor changes of how it was done from company to company, but essentially you would draw out a shape in the design model, and then you'd use that shape to clip out all of your references and then rotate your view and then reference in a sheet border. Okay, this is essentially the same process with the OpenRoads Designer tools, except it's all automatic. It's all automated using these tools. Okay, so again, I will demo all of this out for you, but just wanted to kind of give you an idea of how it works. Now, and not to put the cart before the horse, but when there is some new settings that whenever the plan model is placed in that view one default, there's a setting in the references when you create the drawing model. It's called sync view. And if you set it to settings from design model, what it will do is automatically, I hate to use the word propagate, but will automatically push through all those updates to your drawing models and your sheet models as things change in the design space. It could be something as much as just turning on and off a level. That will automatically be pushed through all of your different sheets. Or if you add a new reference file, that again will automatically show up on all your sheets. Okay, but it has to be placed in that view one default drawing model. The reason I point this out is because this setting only really works for that view. And so let's say, for example, cross sections, if you're creating a cross section sheet, those typically go in the 3D model, right? You have to place those boundaries in the 3D model to get your cross sections. And so that setting I just talked about, that sync view settings from design model, won't work on a cross section. But what you can do is actually put your 3D model into that view one default, and now that setting will work for your cross section. So there's a lot of different nuances there to how you can get these updates to work. Anyway, so part one is to place out your name boundaries. Again, the cutting shapes for your sheets. Now, if you're doing a profile, you've obviously got to have a profile view open. So that's just a very typical process with civil design. You open up that gridded model and pick a view and place it in there. And then once you have that model open, you would place your profile name boundaries in there. And as I said already, cross-section name boundaries are spliced right through your 3D model. So you've got to have a 3D model open in order to get those to show up. Okay. Name boundaries, again, once they are placed into the CAD file, you can open what's known as the name boundary manager and take a look at all the different name boundaries that may have been created or that you created that are, in that drawing or in that DGN file. Okay. So you'll see them all listed there. And then from here, you can actually go to part two, which is to actually create your drawing model and your sheet models. So part two, again, after you've placed those name boundaries, you're going to use one of the, and I'll step back here. There's some some tools right up here in the name boundary manager that will allow you to initiate the process of creating those drawings, the drawing models and the sheet models. Now, the one trick here, and I'll point this out when we do the live demo, you want to make sure you're using the correct tool along the top of this dialog. So if I were to pick any one of these different groups here, all these will kind of ungray out or undither. And there's a lot of different methods for creating sheets, and you want to make sure you pick the right sheet that matches up with the seed that you've picked. Again, I know I'm putting a little bit of the cart before the horse here, but we'll get to all that. And then once you've picked the correct tool for that, it will automatically use those name boundaries, and it will create one drawing model for each and every shape or name boundary that you've created. And then from there, it will take those drawing models and reference those into and create on the fly a sheet model. Okay. There is the ability, if you're doing cross sections, one note here, when you create a plan or plan and profile type sheet, the drawing models and sheet models are all created together as one step. Now, there is the ability on the dialog for cross sections to turn off the sheet model process, and it will only create those drawing models. And this is really helpful because from time to time you may find, maybe you lay out your cross sections every 100 feet, and then you decide, oh, I need to go back in and add some additional cross sections. Well, if you've already created your sheets for cross sections, it's very difficult to get in there and kind of reinsert additional sections after the sheets have already been created. So, this can be a two-step process where you create only the drawing models, then go back. If you need to add in additional sections, you can do that to the drawing model spaces. And then when you go create your sheets, it will insert those sections at the appropriate stations where they fit along the path. Okay. But the plan and profile sheets, you can't do that process. All right. So that's kind of the process. Now let's actually see it in action. All right. So I'm going to jump out to my OpenRoads Designer. Again, I'm using OpenRoads Designer 2022 R3, which is the most recent version. For the most part, these tools have not changed all that much over the years since they've been released. But there are a few minor buttons and tweaks that have been updated along the way, but they're pretty much the same depending on what version you might be on. All right, so first let me give you the lay of the land here. I am using a Bentley workspace, a delivered out of the box workspace. It's just the training and examples Imperial workspace and work set. And what you're looking at here is essentially one of Bentley's most commonly used data sets, where we've got a couple of north-south road, that's called London Road. You got an east-west highway with some on and off ramps. And what we're doing here, and kind of the more common, or I don't even want to call it a best practice, but the most common way to set up your sheets or to do your sheets is create something known as a container file. That's the way Bentley's set theirs up, and I tend to agree with that process. They create what's known as a reference container, and essentially all that is a blank, empty DGN file, and then all of the different design elements are referenced into that container file. So again, everything we're looking at here, the London Road, the highway on and off ramps, you'll see there's a terrain model as well. All of those items are referenced into this container file. And then when you go create your sheets, you create, blank, empty DGN file, and you only have to reference in that one container file. And what you do is, and then a little trick here to make this all work, is you set your live nesting depth to 1. And what that does, if you're not familiar with that, it basically says I'm referencing in this reference container to my current DGN. And when I set live nesting to 1, I also want to reference in every file that is referenced into the container file. All right, so what that does allows you to more easily manage the files that are being referenced into your sheets. You may have 10, 12, 15 different design files referenced into that container file. But when you go and create your different sheets, you only have to reference in that one container file with live nesting at 1, and all of those design 10, 12, 15 files get referenced in automatically. Okay, so that's what we have here. So that's kind of the lay of land. The other thing you're going to want to do is make sure you set your terrain model active in this file. And that is so that when you open up your profile view, you'll see that ground line in your profiles. Okay, from here, I'm going to go over to the drawing production tab, and we're going to go ahead and launch this name boundary tool. What are we doing on time here? We're doing okay. So this is the name boundary tool. Again, this is part 1. We're going to be laying out the shapes that we want to create for our sheet foundation, where we're going to clip out our sheets. So along the top here, the first thing you need to know is, what type of sheet am I creating? Now, in our case, we're going to be doing a plan and profile. Now, that is actually a 2-step process in and of itself. First, you have to lay out the name boundaries for the plan area, and then you have to lay out the boundaries for the profile area after that. So you kind of, it's a 2-part process. So the first icon over here is for civil plan. The third one is for civil profile, and the fourth one is for civil cross section. These other ones are kind of just different flavors of plan or cross section, okay, or other, plan by 2 points or by a drawing boundary. So there's other ways to lay out. But when you're creating a plan and profile sheet along an alignment, this is the one you're going to want to use. Quick little tip and trick that I've always used. In the early days of using this tool, it was a very finicky tool. And if you didn't do what I'm going to call the first 3 steps in order, back to back in order, then sometimes the tool itself would kind of just freeze up on you. And you'd hear that little blinging noise, and it would lock you out of the tool, and you'd have to exit out. And if you were lucky, all you had to do is exit out of the tool. But sometimes you'd have to actually exit out of the software entirely. So again, just passing this info along to you. If you do step 1, 2, and 3 in order, back to back to back, I mean, the software's come a long way. It's not as finicky as it used to be, but this process has never failed me. And what the 3 steps are is, first, select your type of plan or type of sheet you're going to create. Pick the drawing seed you want to use. I'll cover what this means exactly. Pick the drawing seed, and then immediately go down and pick your path. And as you do that, you'll see it'll say identify the path element. If you do step 1, step 2, step 3 in order, back to back to back, then you shouldn't have any issues with making adjustments to the rest of the dialogue. Okay. Again, earlier versions of the software, it would be very finicky and you'd get locked out. All right, so now let me describe all this. Step 1, again, pick the type of name boundary. Step 2 is the drawing seat. Now, I am using the Bentley workspace, and this is what they have available. But what these drawing seeds are is basically hundreds of man hours building essentially a full-on sheet behind the scenes and built into a DGN library in the workspace that you're using. So the names of these may change from workspace to workspace. So if we have some consultants out there, well, I wouldn't say it gets tricky, but each time you open up a different workspace, you're going to have to get familiar with the naming convention that was used in that workspace to identify which is the appropriate drawing seed for what you're trying to do. Now, I have seen a lot of people adopt sort of the Bentley naming convention, but essentially what you want to do if you're creating these or if you're picking from these, you'll see the size of the sheet. So that's ANSI D in this case. And then what type of sheet is it going to create? So in this case, a plan is basically ANSI D plan. It's just going to be a one sheet. It's going to be a set of sheets, a series of sheets that are nothing but one plan. A plan in the Bentley naming convention means it's going to be 2 strips of plan on each sheet. So, one plan over another plan. And then there's the option for a plan profile plan, meaning this is going to create a plan over profile sheet. and this is the plan portion of it that you're laying out. And then of course, there's another one here, say same thing, plan, profile, plan at 20 scale. All right, so again, each workspace will be slightly different, but you know, hopefully whoever built these seeds, drawing seeds, will actually give you a good naming convention so you understand what it's to be used for and what type of sheets. Okay, so in this case, we're going to be doing a plan and profile, and I'm laying out the plan portion first. So I'll select that. That's part 2. And then part 3, as I said before, if you look down here, it wants to know the path element. So I'm going to identify, I'm going to do sheets along this north-south road called London Road. So I'm going to zoom in there, and I'm going to pick that path. Now, once I do that, if you watch this dialog box, couple of things you'll notice. It'll automatically start populating some areas along this dialog box. Namely, it gives me the name of the road, and it starts tracking along the stationing. You'll also notice in plan view, it's kind of showing me where it's going to place or start placing these boundaries or these shapes. From here, I can do whatever I want to do to this dialog box, make changes, edits, alterations, whatever. Let me describe what's going on. So when I pick this plan, profile, plan seed, it automatically populates it at 1 inch is 50. That is, again, somebody built the seed behind the scenes and pre-populated that as a scale. Now, the way the OpenRoads Designer works is you can actually make changes here to this. If you did not want to make a 1 inch is 50 scale drawing, you could just change it right here. Now, I'm not going to do that, but you can. Now, you'll notice there's a couple areas on this dialog called name. Now, the first thing is we are going to lay out clipping shapes, if you will, name boundaries. They each get a name. Each individual one gets a name. Now, I don't care what you call it, plan, whatever. If you want to call it plan and profile, P and P. But there are 2 tips, I guess, here that you want to make sure you do. One is you want to make sure you always put, in my case, I always put the number 1 in the front, because what this will do is it's going to lay out shapes, and you don't want your first shape to be just called, sorry, I changed it because I didn't tap. Oh, I got 3 tips actually. P and P1, and then hit the tab key. When you're done typing in, hit the tab key. That will move you to the next data field, and it will lock in that value there. Okay, see, now it doesn't change on me. Okay, so that was tip 1. Tip 2, you're always going to want to put like the number at the end that will sync up with the shape you're about to lay out. So if I didn't put a 1 here and I lay out these boundaries around here, the very first one is going to be called P and P. And then the second one will be called P and P, and it will append the 1 at the end there. So I'll have P and P, and then the next one will be P and P1. And then the third one will be P and P2. So you want to sync up your numbers. So that's a tip there. Make sure you put a 1 at the end. And then the third one, and this one really got me along the way for many, many days before I figured out what was going on. Do not, I repeat, do not, when you use the name here or the name here, do not use an ampersand character, the and symbol. So I'm talking about this thing here. Do not use this in your names. For some reason, when you do that, the software doesn't recognize it. It locks up everything, and it does not allow you to produce sheets. And the apply button, if you will, is grayed out, and it just doesn't let you create them. So that can really cause issues. Okay, so if you want to put, oh, see, I'm locked out. So see how fickle and finicky it is? I don't know if you can hear that, but it's blinging. So I've got to close out of this, start over. Again, this is a little bit tricky, but step 1, step 2, step 3, and now we're good. So you can type in a description. This is the description for the name boundaries. Now, what's going to happen here, the next 2 settings here, is we're going to be laying out all these clipping shapes along the north-south path. They are going to go into what's known as a group, and you can create an entire sheet set based on a group. Now, in this case, we're going to create a brand new group. So I'm going to leave it set to new, and I'm going to give it a name. Now, my recommendation is I typically will leave the name of the road in there, or the path. And I will also, in my case, I will add in usually the scale just because, you know, you can place more than one set of boundaries or groups into this DGN file. And, you know, it just helps to know the name of the group is the name of the scale. So that helps me just kind of differentiate. So I usually will do something like that. Okay. Again, you can give a description to the group. That's helpful. And now as I start moving my mouse around, again, it's tracking the starting location. So you can do a couple of different ways to start where the name boundary is going to get laid out. You can start down here, just kind of move your mouse past the start of the path. You could type in a value here and lock it with this toggle, or you could just use this button to lock it to the beginning of the alignment. So I'm going to just do that this time. Okay. And now I'm going to left click in the view here, because if you're following this, it says accept, reject. And when I left click that, it starts laying out the shapes as I move my mouse. Now, these numbers down here, again, is coming from this drawing seed. Somebody figured it out, and they figured that on an ANSI D sheet at 1 inches 50 scale, you can fit approximately 1,400 lineal feet along that sheet, okay? And also, because we're doing a plan and profile sheet, that 200 foot left and 200 foot right would be the maximum space top to bottom that you could fit in order to, you know, fit a plan and a profile on a sheet. So you can actually change those numbers if you want, but what I don't recommend is going any larger than the total distance that is shown here from the seed. So in other words, don't go any longer than 1,400 feet, and don't go any, you know, wider or taller than 400 feet. So for an example, if you came in here and you said, you know what, this space right here, I don't want to break off my sheet right at this intersection. I want to break it off a little shorter. So what you can do is just come in here and type in another number. I'm going to just go with 750 just for fun. And that lays out this sheet here. Now, I don't want to actually lay out the rest of the sheets at 750. So what I can do is move my mouse so that just one shape is there. I want to accept all the rest of them. I'm going to left click to temporarily hold it and left click to accept that. Now, if I go to my name boundary manager, and I'm going to speed up here a little bit because I'm noticing we're getting really behind here. On the plan group here, now I have this one shape, but that's not going to work for me. I need to lay out the rest of them. So what do you do here? You go back into that tool, reset 1, 2, 3, and now I want the rest of these to actually be part of that group. So how do I do that? Well, I've already got a group created in this DGN file, so I can pick, instead of new, pick London Road 50 scale. That will now place the subsequent name boundaries into that same group. And now where do I want to start my location? I want to start it right at the intersection of where this last one left off. So I'm going to pick the intersection of that and that as my starting station. Left click to accept that. And now it'll start laying out the rest of these at the appropriate or, you know, seed defined values. Let me talk a little bit more about this. So again, the length is how much lineal feet will fit on the sheet. Left and right offsets are, you know, left and right, which would be the height of that view in the sheet. A couple other settings here. Overlap allows you to overlap the beginning of a border. Sometimes what people will do is, if you want to, you know, put a little extra space here at the beginning of your alignment or the beginning of your project, I would lay out that first boundary the same way as I just did this first one before, but I would add a little overlap here, maybe 50 feet or 100 feet, and it will actually move this down a little bit further to give you some space at the beginning. So again, I would just lay out that one sheet with a little extra and then go to the rest of these and do match lines as opposed to overlap. The other thing here is the boundary chords. And what this does is it basically just puts vertexes along the long edge on either side. So in this case, I have 20 boundary chords. I've got 20 vertexes along here. And what this does is it allows the shape or the clipping shape to curve around along with the alignment. If I were to set this to 0, you can see now I'm creating rectangular shapes. Now, again, this is, user defined. You can define exactly how you want. You can lay out individual shapes like that, or you can do, the whole set the same way. I'm going to set this back to 20. Okay. And now finally, my last word of advice on this create drawing toggle will immediately jump you into part 2 when you're done creating these boundaries. Remember, I had part 1, lay out the boundaries, part 2, create the drawing and sheet models. I will always, always, always leave this turned off. The reason for it is it's very, very easy to create your drawings after the fact using that name boundary manager, okay? And certain sheets actually require it to be off in order to do the second part. So in other words, for plan and profile sheets, I cannot create a plan and profile sheet until I've laid out my profile name boundaries, which I have not done yet, okay? So I need to kind of not create those sheets. Otherwise, I'm going to get a sheet that has just the plan boundary on it and not any profile. So I will always leave that off, because that way there, even if I'm, running quickly or, get, caught up, my mindset is keep this off, and I will never have to go back and fix my plan and profile sheets or delete out work that I've already done. Where certain sheets you can leave that on, others you cannot. It's just best to leave it off. All right. Okay, and so then you continue moving along, and again, you can set this stop station here at the end. You can lock it in at a value. You can move your mouse along until your boundaries look good, and then cover everything that you want. I'm going to left click there, and it says, do I want to place that? Accept it. So I'm going to left click and accept that. And now I've got my name boundaries laid out for plan. I'm going to look at my name boundary manager, and you can see I have one group that starts at PMP 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so that's each one. You can select them here. You can delete them, individually. Okay, there's a lot of different things you can do from here. Because I'm running short on time, I need to really move this ahead. All right, so now what we need to do is create our profile boundaries. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of open up my profile view. So I'm going to zoom in on my, and I'm just opening a regular profile gridded model. This isn't anything new. I'm going to put it in view 4 because I know I have that. And I'm going to click there. And so there's my profile view. Now I'm going to go and create and lay out my name boundaries from my profile view. So again, place name boundaries, step 1, 2, and 3. And remember, so in this case, we're going to do civil profile. That's step 1. Step 2 is to pick a drawing seed. You can see Bentley has quite a few of them here. I'm not going to cover them all, but they're pretty similar with the naming convention. ANSI-D is the sheet size. Profile, you can do plan and profile. Okay, you can do just a plain old profile. You can do profile where there's frame annotation, meaning all the annotation goes below each, below the profile as opposed to on the elements. And there's some new ones in this most recent version of the software. Super elevation annotation can be added too. All right, so we're just doing the plan and profile version. That's step 2. And then step 3, and before I get there, I want to show you, I'm not going to click anything, but there's a couple of methods of how you can lay out your profile boundaries. Right now it's set to from plan group. So when I go do step 3, which is the identify the profile view, I'm going to click in here, and you'll notice that it automatically laid out my boundaries already. And this is because of this method set here, from plan group. And what that does is it looks at the plan boundary limits and will automatically match up your profile limits to that. Now you can do from station limits and allows you to set up your profiles, separately from the plan, but that's not what we're after here. We're trying to create plan and profile. So I'm going to leave that to plan from plan group. Again, the name up here is the name of each individual shape. The name down here, you have a group and a name. That's the name of the profile group. So we do need to create a brand new profile group. Again, London Road is good, but then I also like to put in the scale or the vertical exaggeration or both. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to do a 10 scale. What you'll notice, again, all of these settings here come from the seed. You can adjust them if you need to, but make sure you don't go change any of these bigger than they are. So vertical exaggeration, I'm actually going to go to 10. And you'll see when I change that vertical exaggeration from 5 to 10 and tab, the available profile height drops down to 40. And that's because I'm scaling it twice, okay, vertically. So the vertical height gets cut in half. You can apply top clearance, and that's just a master unit there. So it's not really 0.5 above, but it's multiplied by your sheet space of 12 and 50. And then there's a bottom clearance. So if you had underground utilities, you can add a little more to the bottom here. All right. So I want to go back here under my name, London Road, and it's going to be, 50H10V. Okay. All right. And then, so another thing that will happen too automatically, and this is really nice with the software, is it's laying out these boundaries, and it's looking at not only my design element, which is my vertical alignment, but it's also, when this is turned on, it's looking at my terrains. And if I turn that on, it will center these shapes vertically based on where the data is for both the alignment as well as the terrain. I turn that off, it will adjust it just based on the alignment. Okay. Use the vertical active. You can have multiple, or active vertical. You can have multiple vertical alignments. If you're doing drainage and utilities, you could turn on whole conduits only so that it won't clip out a conduit based on, its distance there. And of course, always keep the create drawing turned off. One last thing I want to point out too, and this is kind of important, is these settings right here, this elevation datum and station datum, and then how to shift the profile. So in this case, the elevations of our ground do not change all that much, neither does our alignment. But if you had a very hilly area, what you can do is actually shift and break these up so that you can shift your profiles based on certain criteria so that everything fits on one sheet within the boundary area. And the way that you would set that up is determine how you'd like to break those. You could break them at the datum stations, which it will look at this information here, where it's needed. So just, willy-nilly on the station, wherever it needs to break it to shift that profile. At profile points, meaning just PVCs, PVTs, that type of information, or don't shift at all, in which case the boundary would just kind of stay where it's set. And if the ground line or the alignment runs off of the sheet, so be it. All right, now if you set it to datum stage, what it's going to look at is these two values here. It's going to shift it up and down in multiples of 5 feet for the elevation, and it's going to lock it into breaking at, in this case, a 50-foot interval. So at every even foot 50. So 10 plus 50, 11, 11, 50, that type of situation. Or you can change this to every 100 feet or what have you, whatever you want. Okay, so sorry, I'm talking really fast here. We got to get going. But so here's our boundaries. I'm just following my prompts. Do I want to accept that or reject that? I can accept it. I'm going to left click here, and it placed my name boundaries. And now I can go to my name boundary manager, and you'll see now I have a plan group as well as a profile group. And what you will now notice in the plan group, I now have a notice here that I have a linked profile group linked to this plan group, and it tells me exactly which one it is. Okay, and you'll see the profile group there called what I called it, and there's the profile 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so now from here, we've just laid out our plan and profile cutting shapes, and now we can go and create the sheets. From here, it doesn't matter if you want to create your sheets from the plan group or from the profile group. It really doesn't matter. So you can pick either one because they are linked. But the one trick here that you really need to make sure that you pay attention to is when you selected the drawing seed in that first step there, we picked the seed that allows for plan over profile on the sheet. So we need to make sure we pick the correct tool to create the plan over profile sheet. What you'll notice, whether you pick the plan group or the profile group, certain buttons up here undither or gray out, and these are the buttons that allow you to create the sheets. But what you'll notice, if I hover over this one, it says create plan drawing, and that is not what we want. We do not want to create a plan drawing. What this will do is create drawing sheets and drawing models and sheet models, but it will still use the seed that we used. So what will happen is you'll get a bunch of sheets that have only plan on it, and they will only be that sort of strip above where a profile would go without any profile below it. In other words, it won't automatically fill up the plan view to fill the whole sheet, because that's the seed we used didn't allow for that. Okay, same thing with you go to profile, you can create profile drawing. Again, not what we want. We won't get any plan view on our sheets, only profiles, and it will be a little strip at the bottom. So what we're looking for in either case is this tool here, create plan/profile drawing. Now, before we get there, there's this one intermediate tool or a dialog box that we're always going to want to see. And it only will show up if you turn on this button here called the Show Create Drawing dialog. When you turn this on, it will actually show you that intermediate step. Now, even if it's just a matter of just reviewing it and clicking OK, that's great. But if it's, you need to make changes on it, the only way you're going to make changes on it is if this button is turned on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create my plan and profile sheets here. And now this is the draw. Where is it? Come on. This is the dialog I'm talking about. This will only show up if this is turned on. Now, in the very beginning, I set my drawing to 1 inches 50, and I just used that because that's what the seed told me to use or wanted to use, and that's what I left it at. But if I had changed it to 1 inches 20 or 1 in 10, I would absolutely have to come in here and change this as well. And again, if this was turned off, this would not show up. This whole dialog would not show up. And what I would get is, ANSI D sheets that were drawn at basically 1 inches 50, but put on a one or scaled at 1 in 20 or 1 in 10. So everything would be off. All the annotations would be off, so on and so forth. Okay, real quick, and I am way behind here. The plan and profile sheet is what we're going to create. The left side are all the settings for the plan boundaries, and the right side is for the profile. And you'll see there's areas and categories. This is all the information for the drawing model, for plan, profile, and this is all the information for the sheet. And you can make changes. What you will notice is that there's an annotation group for plan and profile. Again, this was all built into that design seed. You can change it here for that drawing seed. You can make changes here of how you want your annotations. Okay, if you want a different annotation group for your profile, you can make changes here as well. I am not going to do that. In fact, let me make sure I go back here and pick that grid. Okay, and then the sheets, everything should be all set up. The one thing I do want to do, which I'm not going to have time to get to today, but you can actually turn this on right here, and what it will do is add these drawing sheets to your sheet index, which again is just a way of managing all the sheets that would go into a plan set that you could then push directly out to the print organizer. And then this open model just opens to the last model that is created when it's done with this process. You do have the ability, and I really have to say this even though I don't have the time, these toggles and switches allow you to take these drawing models that are created or sheet models that are created and push them out to a different DGN than the one that you've created your name boundaries in. So it would just be a matter of toggling these on, telling it where to go get that file or which file to put it in. Okay, and it will separate them out as much as you need to based on how many toggles you turn on. You can also push out one DGN that includes just the pertinent models that it needs into its own DGN. So in this case, we have 4 sheets that are going to be created for plan and profile sheets. You could push them out and you'd get 4 individual DGN files, and each DGN would have one plan drawing model, one profile drawing model, and one sheet model that make up that one sheet. So that's a very popular toggle here because that allows multiple people to be working in one sheet, doing whatever individual annotations maybe they want to do, while somebody else could be working in a completely different sheet. If they're all placed in this one DGN file, then only one person could be working on those different sheets at a time. All right, so that's all I'm going to say and do. And we're going to go ahead and click OK and let it do its thing and its processing here. Give it a minute. And I really apologize. This ran really long. Maybe we do a part 2 or something if you guys have any interest. And it's still working a little bit here, 67%. I want to, leave enough time here for couple of questions if there's any. And there you go. So there's the sheets have been created. So a couple of things are done here besides just creating those models. So what you will also notice is that there are now saved views created. So it will create saved views for each of those different models that it created, which makes it real handy and convenient, because really what we did here is we created models. All right, we've got all these drawing models. Some are plan, some are profile. And we've created sheet models as well. These are all, again, models, just like a 2D design model, but they're drawing models, and you can tell by this icon, or sheet models. But because it created the saved views, we can now just come down here and just go to those views as opposed to swapping out and going to different models. You know, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, it really doesn't matter. But let's take a look at one of the, let's just pick any one of these random plan view models. Okay, so again, this is a drawing model. This is the clipping shape or the name boundary, okay, that we laid out. So that's kind of already clipped out and rotated. What we can do, and I'll just show you this real quick, if we didn't like how far out that drawing model was, we can, let's close this. We can, you know, again, these are just vertexes. So, you know, if we wanted to do something like this, we could very easily do that. And now all we do is go back into our drawing model, and you'll see that shape's already been clipped out, just like we did. And then if you want to take a look at the profiles, pick profile 2. Again, it's already been annotated. So we use that grid annotation. So this is all part of the annotation. The vertical alignment's been annotated as well, using whatever annotations was set up in the annotation group. This isn't an annotation element, but class. So there's that. And again, then the sheets would be down here. And that's what we're looking at for the sheets. Now, again, plan over profile, it's perfectly lined up. Everything's clipped out, cropped, everything. Now, what you might notice too is that maybe because of the curvature here, our plan went off. That's no big deal. This is just like any other tool or any other sheet creation method where that's just a reference, right? So you've got your profile reference here and your plan reference. And so you can easily just say, you know what, I need to move that down. And you just go to your reference dialog and move this and just kind of, you know, and I would have AccuDraw on, which I do, so that I could just move it perfectly vertically up and down and left click there. Okay, and so, you know, kind of, you know, again, you can clip this out or move this around or whatever, but that's just the clipping shape, not actually the, anyway, so that's kind of plan and profile sheets. You know, I've got a ton more to talk about, but I could probably talk for another hour. I wanted to leave a few minutes here. Chuck, if you're out there, maybe you can advise what to do. I'm thinking I'm going to call it for the day here. I know people are on their lunch break, so, you know, probably can't run over.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That's good stuff. If anybody has any questions, just put them in the Q&A. Give you a couple minutes here.
Yeah, and I do apologize. I had illusions of grandeur. I thought I was going to get to, you know, twice as much stuff as I actually did, and I also apologize for talking so fast. I realize I'm trying to fit a lot of stuff into 45 minutes here, and obviously I didn't get there. I hope this isn't. I hope I didn't just cover things that you're all completely familiar with. I did try and throw in some tips and tricks, or at least, you know, some learning curve items. Like I said, when you come into this name boundary, one of the big tips is always go 1, 2, 3. That will help keep from, you know, kind of getting locked out of the tool. Always keep the 1 after the name. Yeah, don't use an ampersand. That's a big one. All right.
Joe, we got one question. How does the sync view work again?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things, so what happens is when you get into your, let's say your plan drawing model, and this is set up in the sheet seed now, it's a relatively newer setting. But when the sheet seed is set up, so I'm talking about when you go into your name boundary and you pick that seed, again, this is sort of a DGN library item that's loaded with the workspace and somebody spent hundreds of hours building it. But one of the settings they did in there is they create this sort of placeholder drawing model. And in that drawing model, in the reference dialog, they're going to be referencing in that name boundary. And in that setting, there is a synchronized view setting called settings from design model. Now, the earlier versions of this tool and creating these seeds, geez, I don't know, 2020 R1, R2, so a couple of years earlier, this was set to none or volume only. I forget exactly what it was set to, and it didn't have this settings from design file or design model. So if you are somebody that is building these, sheet seed definitions, they call them, you're going to want to make sure once you create this placeholder, your drawing model placeholder, that you go in here and set this settings from design model. Okay. Once you do that, that is what allows for, if I, came into my design model, let me do something dramatic here. Let me see, what do I want to do? I'm just going to turn on, what is this level? TL lane line. So if I come in here and go into this corridor London Road, I'm just going to turn off all these things. Oop, lane sidewalk. Where did it go? Did I miss one? Yeah, well, some things turned off, right? Did anybody see? I didn't quite see what turned off. Let me do that one more time. Okay, so that the cut daylight line there, and you'll see just going like that and setting up something here now, going into that plan profile drawing model. It's already been updated, so kind of turn those off. So that's what that setting will allow for. So if you were to, again, come in here and make changes to levels that are turned on, or even if you attached a new reference, they would all automatically show up. Okay.
I think that's it. Any other questions? Got some thank yous here. Yeah, this just means, Joe, that you got to come back and continue.
Yeah, if there's some interest in it, I could follow up. Like I said, I had some other thoughts to about the annotations. Really under the drawing production, there's the place label. This tool is really great. It does leverage some of the civil elements and attributes on your items. If you're laying out, for example, you're doing northing and easting or station offsets, it will read that from a reference element like your alignment. But the real power here is the civil labeler tool, which is getting unbelievably powerful in the last.
Let me just interject there, Chuck. I know you got to close this thing off, but let's just plan a part 2 where Joe just kind of picks it up and kind of finishes what he had intended on finishing with the annotation.
Yeah, that's fine. That's a big thing here in Michigan. MDOT's done a real good job of setting up their labeler. It's going to be discussed a couple times at our conference in July. So yeah, that's a pretty hot topic. So we'll be happy to have you back, Joe. Go over that.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks again, Mark and Joe, and we'll I know we'll have you back another time or two. But in closing, I think that's all the questions we have. Don't forget about the conference. If you're interested in the conference, I had that opening slide, or you can just email me for information. You should have the email and the invite I sent you for this meeting, or somebody will have it. So if there's no other questions, thank you very much, Joe and Mark, and we'll see you in the near future.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and I apologize if for not getting to everything today, but we'll come back and do it again.
And then we'll have this uploaded to our YouTube channel later on today. I sent the link. It said it went live. I don't know if everybody saw that or not, but again, if you just Google on YouTube, Great Lakes Bentley User Group, you'll get to our page with all of our videos, but I'll send an email out to the group members and when it's uploaded. And then again, I'll be sending all your information to Bentley to get the PDH credits. They finally gave us our credits for the last meeting 2-3 months ago. Bentley's really slow at doing this, but we'll get it to you. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you in a little bit. Hope to see you at the conference too. See ya.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Yep.